Welcome to the Tapestry Podcast. We are your hosts today, Stacy and Aguilar, and our secret behind the scenes member is back, Nolan. Welcome.
Hey, everyone.
This is our second episode of the Mission Sermon Series podcast. And on today's podcast, we're so excited to have Dave and Ro join us because some of you know that they've done Happily Ever After course, which people are always asking me about.
And fun fact is you guys had wedding of your oldest son a couple days ago, 3 days ago, Saturday.
Yes.
How did that go?
Oh my God, it was beautiful.
It
a lot
was
of tears.
so good,
Yeah, I had to swallow a lot of tears. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
Favorite moment of the wedding?
Favorite moment was when two generations, his grandparents and his parents from both sides stood on the stage to sing the blessing to the newlyweds in 4 different languages.
Wow.
And pass on the cultural heritage from 4 different ethnicities. I think that was a highlight for us, for me.
Yeah, that's probably top for me. But I also appreciated the toasts from his 2 brothers.
Yes.
They brought tears to me.
Yes.
So on our last podcast with Eden, we talked about how as believers, we're invited to live into God's story, restoring all people back into his kingdom. And our biggest takeaway from our conversation with Eden was just how thoughtful and intentional he was about everything in terms of like living for Christ and his kingdom. And we are excited to have you both because we also believe that you two are really living that out. And so we want to just have a conversation with you guys today. So we're going to start off running. Can you give us a little background of yourselves?
Well, we met in college,
Yes.
and we both went to MIT. And kind of the dream school, our parents' dreams were that we would go to MIT and become doctors and,
PhDs and
in
make a lot of money,
engineering.
have a great career.
Yeah, graduate and get a house, get married, have 2.2 kids, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Living a suburbia, life. And then my parents were believers, so they thought, oh, maybe, I can join the church and be a deacon, just serve faithfully in the church, stateside.
While making a lot of money and having a lot of position and respect.
That's right. Yeah.
But we kind of turned that thing upside down because, first of all, my parents were Buddhists, and I was their pride and joy eldest daughter, and declared to them that I really don't want to continue with my graduate studies, but wanted to marry this man from the enemy race and run off to some distant land to be quote-unquote missionaries, and they thought I'd got involved in a cult. Yes, so that was the inauspicious beginning of our wedding story, and that was what we shared at Happily Ever After, and how we became so knowledgeable about relationships.
Yeah. My context is that I was a staunch atheist in high school. So I chose MIT and went there because I felt MIT would be a heaven for atheists. Surely all the scientists, engineers that came together for MIT are all smart people like myself. We would thought religion is just for the weak and people who are looking for crutches. Little did I know God just had me in his hands, and I was radically saved as a freshman at MIT. Yeah, that was an amazing experience. And from there, my life was taking a completely different turn.
Yes.
So what led you, because you ended up moving from the States to East Asia.
Yeah. It actually took us a long, almost 19 years.
No, 12
since
or 13.
we got married,
Yes.
and then
We left 2003, and we got married at 1989.
yeah.
So,
Before your prefrontal cortex was fully formed.
Yes.
Yeah, I heard that in one of the
That's-
previous episodes.
That's right. That's right. That's why we got married.
So I talked about my conversion, right? That's freshman year. That's my first conversion. I had 2 subsequent conversions that led to why we ended up in East Asia. The second conversion that was really important was taking perspectives class in college. That was radical. I had no idea what this class was or about, but it was for credit. And I thought, hey, this meets my humanities requirement. And people said it's a good class.
At MIT,
Yeah.
Perspectives
Wow.
did.
Yeah.
Wow.
We
I
both did,
took it for
actually.
credit. So it's like, okay, I might as well do it because I can earn something. I'm always utilitarian. It's like, hey, this is good, win-win for everybody. So I took it, but I was radically converted into God's being a missionary God and his heart for the nations. So then I realized I was called to something even greater than my parents' dreams or my own dreams about
Yes.
myself.
I too took the same class, and I was completely captivated and inspired by the Cambridge 7, which then kicked off the student volunteer movement, and the story of Robert Borden, who was heir to the big Borden milk dairy empire, who gave away all of his inheritance and then died as a missionary on the way there, died in Morocco. I was really inspired by his story because I was also eldest daughter inheriting a big business from my parents that I felt like I wanted to give up. But in those days, we were full of dreams. It's just that in those times, my paradigm was shifting, and I really wanted to do something great and leave a mark in history. And before I felt that it was through making tons of money, becoming really famous, but then I realized I wanted to do that as part of God's story. Mm-hmm. So that was our second conversion, right?
Second conversion was perspectives, and then the third conversion came quite a few years, maybe 10 years later.
Yes.
We weren't any close to the mission field. Like, we're just living our life, paying off debts and having family. And then came this Anointed for Business seminar at a local church in Pasadena. So we were in LA at the time, and my friends invited me to attend. And then I realized that from the seminar that God really cares about work, and that work is worship. That through work we can transform the world. So from college, right, from before I was a believer, I want to change the world, to taking perspectives, become a believer and taking perspectives, and realizing that God called us to be world changers. And now I realize that my work can actually impact the world. So it's always about this big dream of changing the world. But now I realize that, I can play a part in that, even through my work. I don't have to quit my job and go to seminary and be a full-time missionary or full-time pastor. So that was an amazing sort of third conversion, realizing that being a working professional wasn't a second-class citizen, which I felt in my church at the time.
And what were you doing in terms of work at that time?
I was already in tech. I was in the tech industry. I was working as an engineer. I was interfacing with customers and technology. I had a great job of trying to explain complex technology to customers, so that they would understand and they would buy and they would use. So that was kind of my role, sitting between users and very complex engineering and R&D kind of a team that produced amazing technology.
So even in this world of tech, which I know 0% about, how did you feel like you were taking what you had just learned in perspectives and in the seminar and applying that to your work? What did that look like?
I think initially when I took perspectives, I just felt like, I need to go as a missionary. I had to quit everything to go. So that was before my third conversion. So I felt like, okay, the traditional route is to quit everything, to be called into full-time ministry.
He's doing air quotes for those who can't see.
Yes, air quotes, quote, quote, full-time ministries. Yeah, and then the third conversion helped me realize that we're all full-time ministers.
Yes.
Like Pastor Sam tricked us last week, right? We're all full-time ministers. And that means, I'm an engineer, right? I'm a full-time minister disguised as an engineer working in the high-tech industry. And with that ability, with that experience, I can go anywhere in the world without visa restrictions, because many countries do not allow missionary visas. So how would you go? How would a messenger of God's good news go to these places and touch the unreached?
I think it was also at the same, this what I quote, what I say is our sort of preparation period was really correcting a lot of our misconceptions about a lot of things. For example, we felt like in the church, to really get any respect, you have to have a seminary degree. You can't just be a lay people. And whenever we're introducing ourselves to other people, we just go, yeah, we're just lay people, kind of, embarrassedly. But after sort of this new paradigm that David had gone through, we realized, wow, okay, we are all full-time ministers called to different spheres of influence, and we can shine wherever we are, with or without a seminary education. So that was very
freeing,
very freeing.
Liberating, yeah.
Yes, and God also took us through a lot of things in dealing with our false view about money, because we took pride in kind of looking down on rich people, thinking, they got there by greed or things like that. But God taught us some important lessons about stewardship of money and about generous giving. So during that preparation time, I felt like nothing was wasted. And for me, another very critical lesson was in high school and college, I felt like I had to brag about my strengths. I had to promote my strengths for myself to be usable. And I felt God would surely use all of my strengths, my speaking ability, my extracurricular activities to advance his kingdom. But the really big pivotal paradigm shift for me, rather than that work is worship, is that the people that are most effective in ministry are in their areas of greatest weakness. And that was when I found a job. I wanted to quit motherhood because I was no good at being a mom. And one of our spiritual directors at the time said, I've observed people who are most effective in their ministries. They brag about their areas of weakness. And so 2 Corinthians 12, 10 to 11 became my life verse, that I will be bragging about my weaknesses so that Christ can be strong. And so that was what I carried into the next season of my ministry, where I was constantly bragging about my weaknesses. And in fact, it really lifted a lot of burdens off of a very performance-oriented culture where people who are supposedly successful are actually going through the same anxiety and struggles that they also go through. So.
Yeah, I think right now as a staff right now, we're starting to plan our Encounter Retreat, a little plug for Encounter. But what's the most powerful thing about Encounter Retreat is these lay members and staff members who are laying down their weaknesses in front of everyone and being very vulnerable. Like Aguilar shared in a story. He shares that story on the podcast. He shares it at Encounter. And seeing these people that you think are like these quote-unquote perfect, holy people, but they share their stories of brokenness and their weakness and how God uses that for his glory. It's such a wonderful, beautiful testimony to him. And so thank you for bringing that up. So what led you from working in these tech industries, doing what it was that you're doing, to going to East Asia?
Yeah, I think we have to go back to, again, the college days where, because the perspectives class and then the subsequent involvement in the missionary movement, because in college at that time, there were definitely a strong core of people that were committed to, changing the world through whatever it means necessary, right? Full-time ministries or through the job or become a doctor or whatever. So I was caught up in that movement. And then I went to many conferences, and our church also hosted annual missions conference. And then the speaker after speaker would tell us things like, God so loved the world, don't just think about here in America. And we hear about Romans 10:14, right? How can they hear about Jesus or about the salvation of Jesus offer unless someone tells them? So this idea that we have to go, we have to move, we have to take action, we have to initiate was baked into me. So I was committed to go. I felt like I responded to the call to say, God, I'm willing. As soon as we graduated, we pay off our student loans in 2 years.
We're out of here.
And we're ready to go. Right? We told God, okay, one-way ticket. If you want us to buy that one-way flight ticket anywhere in the world, we're willing to go. Just tell us, right? So, and then, in fact, actually, after we graduated, we both went to short-term missions, for a whole summer with Frontiers to the Middle East.
That's right.
Just to confirmed God has called us to the Middle East. So we were never called to Asia or East Asia. We felt from college God called us to the Middle East. Why? Because there's such an imbalance of laborers. We keep hearing data and statistics like, there's so many missionaries that are all over the world, but the Middle East. There's all these missionaries that are reaching Buddhists and atheists and Hindus, but the Muslims. So we keep hearing this need, this call, and we just say, okay, nobody's doing it, we'll do it. We'll go where the gospel hasn't been. We will go where no one has built any foundation, like Paul. Okay, we'll go. We'll be the ones that are pioneering. We're okay. We're willing to do that. We'll do whatever it takes.
Well, for me, it was a kind of a practical thing. I felt that I am a Chinese and I speak Chinese would be a very natural place to go. And so that fateful summer was a time when we would decide if God was calling us together. And back then, we were really in love with Jim and Elizabeth Elliot and their book. And so we said, well, why don't we do the passion and purity thing? Why don't we just split up and let God lead us back together if we're supposed to be together? And then my short-term missions trip got canceled, and I was reassigned to go to the Middle East. And then over there, I fell in love with the party culture because I was such a party girl. I love dancing, and they had parties every night. And I came back and I said, I'm definitely going back. I love this culture. And so it looked like God was calling us back to the same region, and we decided to get married.
Yeah. So we got married like a year after college.
Yes.
And then it wasn't really until 10, 12 years later that
Yes.
we kind of got reconnected. We kind of just went into this place where we had a lot of marriage issues, we had a lot of
Yes.
character issues, and we just year after year, we just felt like God was closing the door for us to go anywhere, but to stay and to fix our
We
issues.
had to work on our own
Yeah.
problems.
Which you can hear more about on Happily Ever After, of course.
Yes, we
Yes.
lay it out in all gory detail.
Yeah. But when the time came in like around 2000, we started like, okay, I think we're in a good place.
Yes.
We had 2 kids at the time. And we said, God, would you please, let us go? And then I had this job change where I actually went in the interview saying, hey, I am going to join this company if you agree that in 2 years, if I do well, if everything's meeting your requirement, in 2 years you will send me to Asia. I didn't explain it 1040. I want to go to 1040 window. I just say Asia. It's a way of describing this where I want to be headed. So I was very intentional when I made that job change, and my boss, my hiring manager, agreed. So about 2 years came, and I stepped up. I said, okay, we talked about this. My record's very good. Let's introduce me to VP of Asia. I want to talk to him about moving there. So it became this very intentional step-by-step process and checking and asking and interviewing that eventually got us landed in East Asia.
And thus began our truly amazing adventure of first becoming last, last becoming first. It truly is like that. You think you're sacrificing for God, but He's piling on this abundant life on you beyond your wildest imaginations. Yeah.
So, what were some of those convictions that helped you stay on task in terms of being intentional about bringing things up? Because when I'm hearing that situation, if I was in that situation personally, I'd be like, you know what? Things are going great. I'm making good money. Maybe He'll forget. Maybe God will forget. I'm just going to park myself here and enjoy this time. What were some of the convictions that led you to, like, were you constantly still praying about it for those 2 years? Were you looking at the calendar being like, these 2 years are coming up?
Actually, I think the most helpful thing was that after we we stood up during the conference to make a commitment,
Yeah.
and then we signed the Caleb Declaration
It was an
shortly
organization
afterwards.
called Caleb Project, and was out of the U.S. Center for World Missions in Pasadena at the time. So they had the traveling teams that went to campus, college campuses across the country, just young people like ourselves. Shortly after graduation, they commit to like 1 year traveling and mobilizing people by spreading God's heart for the nations. And they have these little cards that they spread out. At the end, if you like feel called, sign this. And the
And we
words.
did.
Yeah, so I want to just share the words because this Caleb Declaration was a very important part of our life. And then as a result, we named our firstborn.
That's right.
Yeah, it's a direct reason. It says, compelled by my first love for Jesus Christ, I will obey the Great Commission for the rest of my life. I will accept the priority of Paul to see the gospel preached among those peoples where Christ is not yet named.
So
Not
we
yet
signed,
named. So that was, that was
Yep.
very plain and clear, and we signed that, and we were held accountable to that.
We sent it in, and there was a person at the other end who prayed for us every day and sent us a card encouraging us every week. And we had to submit a report every week of what we were doing to keep our vision alive.
And how long did that last?
It was a 1-year commitment.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was a year or two, but we...
I think we signed on for the second year
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. But this is just one part. And of course, being committed to a local church,
Yes.
I can't underestimate like the power of the local church and community that helped us to walk down. We had mentors.
That's
we
right.
We had really
Community.
good pastors and communities that just kind of walked with us together.
Yep.
So we had really good equipping. We got to serve. We got to do everything in our church, which was really helpful. We call that GMT, General Missionary Training.
Yes.
'Cause we did from like children's Sunday school to leading worship to
Moving
ushering,
chairs.
just cleaning up, doing lunch and food, cooking for people, to whatever it takes. Right, everything in the church we've like done this rotation.
I went into the church to tell the pastor, I'm a campus leader. I won awards for being a campus leader. I can come and help train your leaders. And he had me stack chairs for a year. Those were really great character lessons.
Formative years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question. As I'm hearing this, were there any moments or points where you felt like you doubted, you second guessed, where that decision or to go and serve God in this way? Were there moments like, when you're at Microsoft or wherever you are making money, doing the things, having your little children, being like, you know what, maybe we should just stay here for a little bit longer. Maybe God's going to call us later.
I think maybe in the midst of our 3-year marriage counseling, couples therapy season.
We felt like we were going to get disqualified.
Yeah. I felt like she disqualified us. I was like, I'm on this track, and
I'm like,
God,
dang,
what's the deal with her?
I'm married to this man who's dragging back my future.
Yeah, same. Ditto. I was like, oh, it's all her fault. I was like so close, so ready to go, and now I'm going around in circles.
Yeah, there were feelings like, God, we really wanted to be excellent in your kingdom, but we're just really failing the grade, not making the grade. Yeah, those were the kind of feelings.
And then there was this time I went to a senior pastor. It's like, oh, I'm sure you're glad to hear I'm ready to go to seminary now. Like I'm ready to start my journey into being a full-time minister. And he's like, nope, David, nope, don't go. Stay in your, stay at work.
You should not waste your education.
I was like, what? Yeah, that's the time that I was still only between second and third conversion. I was like, what? Did he just say, like, I'm not good enough? Did he just, like, disqualify me for full-time ministry, in quotes? Like, I was so devastated. I was so shattered. Because, like, everybody around me, like, the seminary, right? You go to Fuller, take some classes, and then you do the next thing, then you graduate, with a halo, and then you can go to the mission field. I felt so disheartened when I was told, just go back to work.
But I think it was in the place of work and in the place, I quit my very lucrative job to become a full-time mom and felt like I was failing the grade as a mom. And in those places, we went through this crushing experience and we realized that was where we were being shaped. Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess I never really doubted the call. It was just kind of delayed. We weren't comfortable. I think God always had this thing in us.
Restlessness.
Like this life ain't it.
Yeah.
Like,
this is not where it's at.
Yeah, I remember singing this song, like, there must be more. There must be more. It's like,
that was a song of our generation.
Yeah. Like we went through the early 90s in Los Angeles. It was this amazing student revival movement in St. Gabriel Valley. Like all these Asian kids were getting saved in college or in high schools. And youth retreats were overflowing with people like running to the altar, crying, weeping, and repenting. It was glorious.
And we were youth counselors during that time.
Yeah. So we just saw God moving in such a mighty way. We're like, this is amazing. And many words were said that this is the generation being mobilized for the great harvest. So then we were like kind of kept in that, stream of just God is moving. It's never about ourselves. It's always about the world. It's about the harvest of all the nations. So I think we were never in that place of complacency, but we are always so fortunate to be in a place. I think being intentional is really helpful, being held accountable, but there's also the grace of God. Because we felt we were disqualified, but then 3 years later we came out of the counseling. We felt better.
And the counselor actually sort of did this little ceremonial thing to graduate us we commemorated the 3-year counseling period.
Of course, we weren't fully whole, but we had the tools.
Yeah.
Then we know how to like express ourselves, our emotions.
And get help.
And then know how to ask for help.
Yeah.
And how God has used that time, that really difficult time in your life.
Oh, so foundational.
To pour into, again, through Happily Ever After. But also, like, you guys have been on our premarital panel.
Yeah.
The ways that God has brought so many couples here at Tapestry, I'm sure all over, specifically in East Asia, to your way to really lead them during their difficult moments, which you would not have been able to do if you had not stayed put and obeyed and really worked on your own sin and brokenness.
Yeah. I mean, God just knows the timetable. Like, we could have just gone out right after college, but we were so young. Like, what do we really have to offer?
We would have wrecked our lives. Yeah.
Like, what life experience do we have to share? But then, that this 12-year delay gave us a lot more life experience and brokenness to go out there in such humility. It's like, wow, we don't know what we don't know, but God's good.
But it's funny that you're saying that, because I went into missions for 3 years right after college, and I felt like that was where a lot of my shaping and my singlehood happened. Then when I came back is right when I met my husband. But I think about how if it was the other way around, how different and difficult might that have been? And like you said, like God is so specific to knowing
Yes.
exactly what is best for us when we
For
are
each person.
For each person,
Yeah.
that individual
Yeah.
detail that
Yeah.
God, this God of the universe, knows and has for each person when we obey.
I imagine nowadays therapy and counseling is a little bit more normal,
Acceptable, yeah.
acceptable. But I imagine
Back
back
then
then
it
when
was
you were married, just got married, probably less. So
Yes.
I'd love to hear how you both were open to it, found a good counselor, stayed with them for 3 years.
I'll tell you the glorious story of how we stumbled into it. My parents decided to throw us a big party, and 2.5 hours before the party, we got into a fight, and that was in Vancouver. And David turned around and went back home, and
I stomped off.
And after that, my parents said, "You choose him or us." And I couldn't choose either, so I decided to come back. But I said, "We cannot live together again until we get some therapy." And also at the time we were advisors to the college group at church, and they asked us to step down because we're not very good examples.
We got fired.
As you're trying to go overseas and you're a
Yes.
local college pastor.
We got fired twice. This is the first time we got fired at church. Like, we're volunteers. You can't fire us. But we got fired.
But we did get asked to step down. And so in disgrace, we had to seek some help. It was either, okay, your journey as a Christian is over, or you're going to get some help. So we got some help. And we had to pay out of pocket. And when I told my mom I was getting marriage counseling, she was really upset. She said, "You went to MIT. You're not a crazy kook. Why are you paying money to get help? You don't have anything wrong with your brain." And she
Yeah.
didn't understand.
Yeah, definitely for family members and
It
some
was
of our
very
friends,
hard.
they don't understand this. But in our church circle at that time, because we had so many counselors, so many
Yes.
Fuller trained MFTs,
wow.
it was quite acceptable. If we had stayed in East Coast where we went to college, it would be so
Very
shameful.
different. Yeah.
It'd be so shameful. But we felt like, wow, God pushed us or moved us to LA where
Yes.
this idea of counseling and therapy was acceptable.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we had a wonderful Christian counselor recommended
Yes.
by church.
Yes.
There's a California Christian Counseling Center in Pasadena. So we had this wonderful woman, a sister in Christ.
Yes, who turned out to be the older sister of one of our classmates at MIT.
I
So-
met him in InterVarsity.
Yeah, so all the
All
more
worked out.
worthy of trust. Yeah.
Yeah.
God just arranged everything.
Yeah.
Going back to your time in East Asia, so how long were you guys there for? What were you mainly doing? Then what brought you back?
Yeah, we were there for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I said earlier, I transferred through a job. So it was a job transfer. So the company moved me.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have to pay for this ocean freight to move the whole household there. And the family all came as family members.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Secondary visa. So we all went together, had a proper work visa,
Mm-hmm.
got a proper job in downtown, this capital city, 20 million people. It was glorious. It was fun. And I went to work every day, but I also know I'm a full-time minister disguised as a working professional. So I get to, be a witness for Christ in the marketplace and also in underground churches in the area.
But it was not the glorious suffering for Jesus and poverty kind of thing. We had a maid, a driver, and we were living the expat life, so
Sort
to
of.
speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was very challenging navigating that because we saw those around us who were not intentional and missional just living it up, and we had to stay very focused on why we were being called there.
Well, because we joined Ascending Agency,
That's
I think
right.
that was really important.
Yes.
Choice that we made. Instead of just going by ourselves, we chose an agency.
Yes.
And that immediately put us in a community of missional believers that went there for the same reason. So as soon as we hit the ground, we were in community with others that been there longer than us and have really good experience, good advice,
Yes.
and pray to seek the Lord to use us effectively.
Yes.
So we were never in an international Christian community.
Yes.
We went with the underground believers, serving them.
So
right
what
away.
did missions in the marketplace look like in East Asia for 10 years?
The mission in the marketplace is not just 9-to-5 work, but it overflows because relationship is never about 9-to-5, right? So it's all of life. It's all of life. It's very holistic. So it's engaging people in relationships. It's after hours. It's weekends. It's doing life with them all the time because people, they are highly relational and they observe you at work in order to know if you're trustworthy. I remember the time that we finally plunked down money to buy a house.
Yes.
There's a tangible difference.
That's right. People
Once we
started trusting
bought
us.
the house and people know that we're not just transient, not the expat person coming in and out, but that we are there on a one-way plane ticket. We will stay as
We're
long as
committed
we
to
need.
stay.
Yeah, we had no term limit. We weren't there for like 2-year contract like many expats. You just come for a couple of years of international venture and then you leave. So we just had this one-way ticket. We bought a house and people realized that, wow, these people are serious. And they realized as working professionals, like we don't get money, we don't get paid. Like why are we doing this, right? So they began to understand that there's a stronger, compelling reason why we were there, and that made it easy for us to tell our story. So it was, I would say, very easy to share our faith. People are hungry.
It was so. My description can only be: we were there during this golden era where fish were jumping into the boat. I had people saying, "How do I join the club? What are the membership requirements? Like, what kind of prayer do I need to pray to have your kind of faith?" And I
Yeah.
didn't have to whip out the 4 spiritual laws. People were just asking me, "How do I have the kind of faith that you have?" And my maid, she was helping out at a baptismal at a friend's house who had a swimming pool. And these people were all getting baptized. And she was helping out. And she said, Tai Tai, boss, I want to get baptized too. So she became a believer. And then she joined my friend's maid fellowship, which her maid was running. So it was just a time when people were just coming to Christ so rapidly.
And these are people that never heard Jesus Christ. So for them,
Yeah.
it's all like, membership requirements. Like,
Yeah.
how can I be in?
What do I have to pay?
And baptism was a weird experience for them, but they were glad because it felt like it's a wedding ceremony for them. So they really into it. They
Yeah.
really want to be baptized in the most elaborate way possible because they really into the ceremony, right? So they equate baptism with this very holy or sacred experience. So they're like, oh no, we don't want to be baptized by you guys. We want a real pastor. We want a real holy man to do it. That's really funny. But yeah.
And then they made a CD, a movie out of the baptismal and passed it to their friends. And some more people got saved.
Just watching baptism.
Did you feel like when you were there, like, wow, the harvest is great, but the
It's
work
Plentiful.
so
is
right.
few?
I mean,
So plentiful.
imagine this is like imagine American company. I was working for American tech company there, and my HR manager asked me, "Hey, David, we're like hanging out here today. We're celebrating Christmas. That's your Jesus birthday. Come tell us about Jesus."
Wow.
This is at
Yeah,
work,
this
in the
is
office, having a party. He
in
brought
front
a
of the
cake. Say,
employees.
Jesus' birthday. These guys, total atheists. Like, come and tell us about your Jesus. Aren't we celebrating
is
his
this
birthday?
about?
Yeah. So, like, in front of the whole company, I get to share, the gospel.
So that's not something that
Imagine in
a
the
seminary
US,
trained
right?
person can do.
Wow. I literally was just telling my friends Hannah and Christine Sue downstairs about how when people ask, what do you do? I get so nervous about saying church. And I'm like, I used to be a teacher for 10 years. And how you guys are having this opposite experience.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
So, like,
Yeah.
it wasn't a place we wanted to go. Like, we wanted to go to the Muslim Middle East.
Right.
But God just had his sense of humor and detoured us first. We'll come back to the Middle East story, but he detoured us in this place that we didn't want to go. It was actually the last place on earth we wanted to go,
Yeah.
but we ended up there. But harvest was indeed plentiful. I did 2 alpha seasons. Every person became
Which we have
Christ.
alpha here at
Yeah,
Tapestry.
it was 100%.
100%. And then we're like, and then afterwards they asked like, we want church now. Like, stay here and make church. Like, let's do church. It's like Alpha Church, right? It just kept going, right?
And that Christmas, we had a Christmas party just for our Alpha friends, which was about, 30, 40 people. And they invited 140 people. And I said, are you crazy? Our house can't contain that many. And they said, well, since you can't do that, we'll just rent a big facility. And they did. So it was just, people were just so
hungry.
hungry.
It was
yeah.
people really hungry. We have no idea until
Yeah.
we got there. Like, this is why, it's, again, right? God's story is about him in
Yeah.
the center of the story. We just, NPC, we're just kind of going along.
Yeah.
And we just felt like, well, okay, this is his script. We learned, right? It's his script, his
Yeah.
schedule. It's not about me. It's not
Yeah.
about us. It's not about my resume. It's not about my, MIT CV or Rosanna's talent. It's
Yeah, and I felt like a Forrest Gump, kind of stumbling through this plot line, where at certain points, all the shrimp boats sank, and mine was the only one floating. That kind of thing. It was very inconceivable that an MIT-trained housewife with a bachelor's degree would become an education expert on primetime TV being interviewed about her opinions on education in this country. But God does strange things like that.
And often those are the times where you're like, oh, I know God is here because
Yeah.
weird things are happening. Or even when you were
Yeah.
saying, oh, I didn't really want to go to this place.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like whenever I feel those, I sense like that's God
Yeah.
nudging
Definitely.
and
Oh,
pushing.
yeah. Yeah, we actually sat down together as a family. Like our kids were like 10, 8, and 2. 3 boys, 10, 8, and 2 at the time. We sat down in our house in Burbank and then we say, well, guys, I'm not going to go because God told me to go. You guys are going to be in it because I
We're
don't
gonna
want to be
pray.
responsible when you're mad and upset about you missing your friends or your cheeseburger. So you guys are going to need to hear from God and you have to own it. So we all sat
they
down
all-
and prayed.
Yeah, they all prayed.
they all heard from the Lord.
From God that they were called.
Yeah.
Wow,
So
that's
we went
beautiful.
when, we did have a tough time the first year, learning the language for our 8-year-old was really tough. Like, the culture shock, the language, they weren't prepared for the language because we sent them to local schools. So
Yeah.
they were in this culture shock and
But he got adjusted and started selling. He was giving away Bibles. No, he was selling Bibles because it's illegal to give Bibles away. So he was selling Bibles and giving free lessons
Wow.
and throwing in some Korean hot cocoa on the side as a bonus and doing hot business.
That's so
Yeah.
So it wasn't like I was preaching at work.
No.
But because of my status of being a professional at work, I was a proper person. I wasn't like,
Right.
what are you doing here? Why are you here? Like, are you a spy? Are you like whatever, right? So, I work for
ulterior
this
motives.
high-tech company, American company. Oh, respectable person. Wow, okay. Then everything else I said will be good.
Right.
Because I'm a credible person now, right? So when I walk on the streets, when I jump in a taxi, when I'm doing my alpha class, I was a respectable working class professional because of that people listen to what I have to share. And I had my secretary getting some training, and then I had her, my secretary, asking her friends. We got a young professional fellowship together. My first year we were there. At work, because I can use my
Right.
conference room. So at conference room we start meeting and praying and trying to just touch all the young people's lives around us. Because there's a lot of young people trying to get into the workplace, and everybody wants to work for an American company, right? So we were like very desired kind of a workplace, a destination for these new graduates. So that was kind of fun working
Yes.
with young professionals.
So what brought you back? Because you were there for 10 years.
Yes,
So,
another traumatic experience.
yeah. So there's a saying that many people pass the test of poverty, but the test of prosperity is very hard to pass. Many people don't pass. A lot of house church pastors, they get imprisoned and tortured, and their faith stood firm. But when they came to North America, there's all this money and comfort. Then they just kind of fall. For us, the breaking point was that we had too much success. David was very, very successful at Microsoft, and my career as an author and speaker on marriage, family, and education had taken off. And our church was going through unprecedented revival. We had 3 services, and at each service, 15 to 20 people would stand up for the first time to give their lives to Jesus. And there so many new believers flooding into the church, not enough people to care for them. And so we had this triple trifecta disaster of prosperity where all our time and energy was sucked up. The marriage suffered, the children suffered, and especially our second child had to face some very difficult things alone. And when he wrote us a letter of his struggles within, we made a decision. We flew a counselor from the U.S. for 40 hours for a whole week of one-on-one counseling with our kid.
That was the most efficient way to get help.
Yeah.
Instead of me taking my son back here. There's no counseling resources in East Asia. So
Yeah.
we had to fly somebody out, and that was really helpful.
And it was at that point where David said, okay, if you're willing to drop your career, and then I'm willing to take time off. And so we just said, okay, we got to leave everything behind. And when people asked us, so what are you guys going to do? We said, we need to go and return to our first love. We had lost our first love. we felt like we were running on recycled skills and knowledge, and there was no fresh fire, no fresh water, because we didn't have time for God or for each other. And we needed to go and find that.
But on the outside, we were truly at the height of our career
Yes.
success.
And ministry.
Yeah, midway through our time in East Asia, I joined Microsoft. I was, head of R&D operations. We're talking about 5,000 people in different cities across the region. And I was responsible for the $300 million campus project that we built in the capital city. It was amazing. It was like, I was walking on water. I was doing amazing things. I was like, I can't believe I'm paid to do this job. I really love it. It's really challenging, fruitful. We had fellowship on campus. We used conference room together for morning prayer. We had Bible study, and I would walk around, and just pray for, all the camp or office environment. It was, again, harvest was plentiful, fruitfulness.
And you were doing work that was influencing the country.
Yeah, I was able to set up volunteer days where hundreds of our employees would go out to serve the migrant workers. Right, and I had so much clout. I can do all kinds of things to get people to move away from their comfort zone or being narcissistic and serve the community. Right. I mean, this is just as close as I can publicly bring them closer to the gospel or the way of the gospel by being where I was. So I had a lot of influence, a lot of impact, and I could share Christ with anyone. And sometimes I can close the door and just pray with my colleagues, right, as they have needs.
Yeah, you had coworkers asking you to pray for their healing and things like that.
Yeah, so I had so much influence, and then I was running this incubator where I started incubating startups, and I was interviewing hundreds of startups. I had impact for thousands of startups and teams across the region, and they all call me like I was the school principal or the West Point. They call us the West Point of Startup Academy in that area. So I was doing extremely well. And just as we were contemplating leaving, I was named as the regional head for Microsoft Ventures. So they had this press release, this announcement, and then
it was kind of awkward.
I was like, I need to submit my resignation, but how embarrassing. And I submitted it, and my boss says, we can't do this. We just announced you a few weeks ago that you're the head of this new ventures. How can we? Now you say you resign, right? So no, we cannot make this public. Just sit on it for a while. Just hold it for a few months.
So we weren't able to make that public until a couple of weeks before we left.
Yeah. So that's the outside, right? But inside we were in so much pain. Right. Inside we were in so much hurt, and we were so dry, so burned out.
Yeah.
I was driving to work like about an hour each way. I was just hating my job. Or not so much hating my job, but I was hating being there.
Yeah.
I was like, I look at the other drivers. I was like, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. It's like people cutting me. The traffic was terrible, right? People cut me off. I was like, I hate you, Hong Kong, I hate you. I was just so short. I was like bad temper, bad mood all the time.
Our bodies were breaking down for that year.
Yeah, we were in bad physical shape.
And then there were people who were lined up at church to seek my help because of my books. And it would be a 1 to 2 hour wait after each service, and our kids were extremely resentful. Mm-hmm. It was to the point where our second child said, for about 2 years after we left that country, he cannot listen to a worship song in that language without feeling intense feelings of rage, because Sunday was their most hated days.
Well, we also made them lead worship. We had a family band, and they all had to help out, and sometimes we had to do 3 services.
Yeah.
Oh my
on a Sunday. And then we pack up and leave after the third set. It was very exhausting. So we literally burned out on all levels. It was difficult.
Yep.
And so then you came back, and
Yeah.
were you able to receive some healing?
Yeah, we quit everything. That was difficult for me to quit at the height of my career, and I was doing well, and people didn't understand why. It was hard to explain. I said, well, we need to take a sabbatical. 10 years working at 110%, running.
We're
100
burned
miles
to a
an hour.
crisp. Yeah.
So we know we're gonna just quit and take a year sabbatical.
Yes.
That idea was new. I have no idea what that means. It's like sabbatical. Yes, that's what people do when they need a break. Let's do a sabbatical. It sounds good. So that's all we knew. And God just started to tell us a lot more once we started that sabbatical
So
experience.
what did he tell you? What happened then?
Well, so the first thing we did upon coming back was enroll in a 40-hour RTF, Restore the Foundation class.
Like a full healing journey.
Inner healing and restoration.
Yeah.
Before we can kind of stand to be together, because we had just accumulated so much.
Yeah, the 1 week intensive. We
Yeah.
did that. Then we went to a house of prayer for
Yes.
for a few
7 months.
7 months.
Initially, we thought, okay, we'll just stay here for 2 weeks. We ended up staying for 7 months
Yeah.
because we hired a sabbatical coach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we realized, oh, there's this idea of sabbatical coaching sounds really good. I think somebody recommended it because we
Yes.
told a lot of people, our friends here back home, that we were burned out. So they said, oh, yeah, it would be really good for you to get a sabbatical coach. And we hired this guy that actually helped returning
Yes.
workers, missionaries and field workers to go through a process. I didn't even know what that was, but we hired him
Yep.
and he put us on the structure.
We did a lot
talk
of helpful
weekly or
things.
bi-weekly.
Yeah, we did the Berkman test and, all that
Assessment,
stuff. Yeah.
testing, and very structured coaching process. So
Yes.
that was very life-giving. And then first week, going back, so first week in the prayer room, I remember, it's kind of like our prayer sets, but imagine 24/7. So first week I arrived in the prayer room, not Tapestry, but another place. I soaked 100 hours. I logged 100 hours in the prayer room the first week because I just didn't want to
We
get
were
out.
so
It
dry.
was so good. I just sat there. I slept in there. I took a nap in there. I worked in there, caught up my emails in there. I just kind of lived in the prayer room for 100 hours that week. I was so dry, and the
We
prayer
were
room was just
so-
so soothing. The God's presence was there, and I just felt like if I'm there, I'm gonna be okay. And then and then that was first week, and then we were there for 7 months.
Yeah.
It was
And
so
then
good.
with your second son, was that also part of his process, that prayer room?
Well,
or-
we came back we came back because he was going off to college. So
I
we
see.
sent him off to college as part of that 1 year
Yeah.
time. So he went off.
But during that 1 year sabbatical, that was our first priority, is to repair our broken relationship with him.
Yeah.
So
During the break, I would take him to see a therapist. Back in Pasadena, we would still continue to see the therapist. So whenever he's taking a break, we would do that. And then, but he was off to college, having his experience. Yeah.
And then now you have been here in the United States for how long?
Wow, that's like
10 years.
10,
It's been 10 years.
10 years.
this is the 11th year.
And there is a new season coming upon you.
Yes. Hopefully. We
Can
think
you-
so.
Yes. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, remember we talked about college and the calling to the Muslim world.
Yes.
So, right now, we observed this sort of 20-year anniversary since we landed in East Asia. And we felt like, hey, God, there's still this promise or this sense of calling to the Muslim world. And we're not too old yet. We're only 58. And how about next 20 years? Like, give me 20 more years, Lord. I wanted to complete this dream, or I want to do this that I felt you originally called us.
And if I can pull that back a little bit, when we left in exhaustion, we went on a world tour. We just traveled around the world, and we ended the world tour in the Jerusalem House of Prayer. And we were rotating through some worship sets in the city of David. And the elder couple there, they were sort of mentors as well as friends. And they just gave us all these books about Israel and replacement theology, etc. And I said to her, I don't understand. We're called to the Arabs. Why is God leading us to learning all this about the Jews? And she said, oh, yeah, all these people that are called to Arab Muslims must first pass through Jerusalem so that they will not take on the wounds and offense of the Arab people. Because ultimately, it's about reconciling two brothers who are hostile towards each other. So what they have seen is that all these people that have been called to the Arabs make a detour in Israel to understand Isaac so that they will not take on the offenses of Ishmael. And that has been our experience because for the past few years, we've been having to do a lot of things with Israel and understanding where they come from. And now that we're pivoting to other parts of the Middle East, we feel like we are better equipped to come at it from a position of the loving father rather than the wounded son on either side.
And so as I was hearing you, you were just joking around that 58, we always joke that Dave and Ro could be the parents of many of our members here at Tapestry. And many people, especially in Los Angeles, feel like we live to retire, right? You hear that phrase a lot. We hear FIRE. So many people are, I don't even know what it stands for, but something about retiring early.
Financially independent, retire early.
Yes.
And that is huge on social media. That
Yeah.
is huge, especially in Los Angeles. So
Young
many people.
people.
Sorry,
Aspire.
overrated.
Yeah, very overrated, and not biblical. However, I want to know, like, why not just retire?
Yeah.
What is it about God's hold on your life that makes you want to spend, like you said, the next 20 years, which would put you at 78? May
willing.
God give you more.
Yeah. I mean, I see our parents living, in the 80s. They're still
right.
doing great. It's like, oh, okay. And I was taking this class on Islam, and a classmate was like late 70s. He's still going at it. He's still going to North Africa and serving, short-term mission trips every year. I was like, oh, okay, I can do that too. So I think in God's call has no clause for retirement. There's no such
Yeah.
thing, retirement in the Bible or in God's call. It's just, God's call is about saying yes to Him. As long as there's a call and I'm willing to say yes, I think there's more adventure to be lived. And I will just continue to serve until the last breath of my life. Recently, I was reading, I'm going through Old Testament, and God just brought back Joshua 14:10-12. This is great, I was like, because I'm, going back to Caleb again, right? And then in our cell group, oh yeah, Nolan, you missed it. That Wednesday night, we had this couple from Pi Hop that came over, and they gave us, prayers of encouragement. And when that person prayed for me and saw Caleb. Saw me as Caleb again. So then brought me back to Joshua 14. Caleb is now 85 years old. And he's not done, right? Verse 12 says, he's like, give me the hill country. He went to Joshua, right? Give me the hill country of which the Lord spoke on that day, like day way back, So it's a full circle back to our college call. And we felt like I'm sending like old Caleb saying, hey, I'm 58. I'm not done. I want this because I felt like that's my inheritance. I'm not done. God's not done with me. So we're going for it.
It is funny, too. I just read our alumni update, and our classmates are all retired and getting into what? Spirituality. I have a classmate that I know well. He has gone to become a certified shaman because he says there is a young generation hungry to reconnect spiritually. And everybody's common experiences now that we've reached the peak of our careers and
All
are
fired.
standing on the mountaintop and discovered that there's nothing much there.
Yeah.
And they're looking for something deeper. And for me, I feel like what we've experienced in these moments of fruitfulness is that there's nothing more gratifying and fulfilling than seeing lives changed as a result of them knowing their creator. And it's kind of addictive to see broken marriages flipped around because both husband and wife submitted their lives to Jesus
Yeah.
and are in love again, and their families repaired. I don't know of any restaurant or any food or any human experience that can rival that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think this is about 30-some years since college, and the imbalance of the missionary force still the same. So I think
Yes.
this is just crazy because their birth rate's not getting
Incredible.
any less.
They're
like-
having more children.
Yeah, of any other, population demographics around the world. So I aspire to be this crazy old man like Caleb. It's like,
Yeah.
give me more to do, man.
Yeah.
I'm not done. And you're not done. You have needs and nobody's stepping up. It's like, okay, I'm raising my hand. Say, Lord, I'm willing to go.
I think, yeah.
Yeah,
No, go
my dream is in my old years, I won't be strapped to a bed with tubes feeding me. I want to do something that's risky and adventurous, and if I die in the process, all the better. But what can be better than taking risks for God to see more people reconciled to Him that have never ever had a chance to hear about Him? What more exciting and addictive things can there be to be done in human experience?
Yeah.
No, nothing.
Yeah, and we're going to definitely maximize on our age, right? We're older now. You have to listen to me. Listen, sit down. Let me tell you about this thing.
Which you do have that authority here at Tapestry, that's for sure. Lastly, I want to end with this question. Can you help us here at Tapestry just kind of parse out how because you've been to East Asia, you've been here, you've been in East Coast, you've now aiming to go to the Middle East. How do you know that you are living for your own story versus God's story. And we know the trick or the hack, as we say nowadays, is to live intentional. I feel like that's what I've been learning from you and from Eden, living intentionally, really being thoughtful and mindful of what it looks like to usher and announce God's kingdom here on earth. But how would you give us, as many of us are still trying to figure out our careers and figure out where God wants us, especially as young parents even, what does it look like to be a part of God's story versus I'm really here trying to build up my own kingdom.
Yeah.
I'm over here trying to really announce my kingdom.
Yeah, that's a good question. Recently, I was talking to our eldest, the eve of his marriage, about his brothers and where they're at, and sometimes we'll kind of grieve that they're kind of away from the Lord, and just said nonchalantly, it's like, oh, they're just kind of building their own
They're kingdom
empires
building.
now.
Yeah, empire building. Yeah.
So I remember listening to this podcast that differentiates, building a kingdom, building your own empire. The difference between, Moses and Pharaoh, right? Pharaoh's all about empires, and Moses is about building God's kingdom. And I realized that, we don't need to understand God's story per se, but if we are just willing to say yes to Him, knowing that He has a story, He has a script, perfect script for each one of us, and He has the schedule. So I've been saying the 3S. His God's story, God's script, and God's schedule. If we just kind of trust that there is a ultimate story and it's going to be worth it. He is a master, storyteller. And if you just let Him weave your story into His story, the story of His glory, it will be so worth it. So I'm not very smart. I used to think I was pretty smart, but after all these years,
the more we live, the more we realize we're not that smart.
there's so much we don't understand and know and can't predict. The best thing to do is just say yes to Him.
One more, on a more technical level, before we left to East Asia, Bobby Clinton and the making of a leader was the thing. He had done research on Christian leaders throughout the ages and in the Bible, over 30,000 such people. And he mapped their leadership development into 6 stages. And he found out that a third finished well. The other 2/3 fell off, the wagon. And the major reason for not finishing well is not having mentors and coaches or community with them.
Yeah.
So part of the reason we decided that we want to allocate the next season, and he took early retirement from Microsoft, is that we want to devote a major chunk of our time to being mentors and coaches for the younger generation so that they can finish well. And our goal is to finish well as well because we need community.
Amen.
Yeah.
Nolan?
You guys read my mind. I was just going to ask. I'm normally not on a podcast, so I can't ask this question, but when people say, very accurately, saying yes, to me, I love hearing the nuance of, because I can interpret that, just that same personality you guys have. Just say yes to everything. Just do everything. Just say yes to God. But but obviously it's not that.
Right.
And yes, it's like saying yes to mentors, saying yes to community, saying yes to how they love you as well.
Yes.
Not just personally, I have to do everything. I have to say yes to everything.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely not that. I mean, saying yes to God is oftentimes denying yourself. That's really, really critical.
Yeah.
What I mean by saying yes to God is necessarily denying yourself, because my way, God's way, is not my way. And my natural desire is just stay home, watch Netflix, chase the next J-drama or K-drama. I mean, I do, but there's some compelling spirit in me that says, no, get up and go do this. Get up and make that call and check on your brother and encourage this person and pray for these missionaries. I'm compelled. I just realized that I every day I have a choice. If I say yes to God, I have to say no to TV or junk food or whatever else,
Yeah, I just wanted to end with this. When you were talking and even the nuance of saying yes, I remember right before I left for Honduras, and that was not my plan or dream I had dreamt of when I graduated from Wheaton. And Honduras was at that time the most dangerous country in the world. I just graduated from Wheaton, and the whole market crashed, so there's nobody hiring anything. This is 2008.
Yeah.
And so I remember when I said yes to going to Honduras, I felt I was at a church in Chicago, and the only thing I remember from that sermon is our shattered dreams are unexpected joys. And I felt God asking me to just let him shatter these dreams that I had dreamt up for myself, that Honduras was not part of that, right?
Yeah.
But that he wanted to shatter them because they were so small and measly compared to these unexpected joys that he had for me, not only overseas, because I was only there for 3 years, but even when I came back, the trajectory of my life to this one yes completely changed. And I liken it to how my daughter, Olive, when she was in TK, we were going to miss her first ever field trip. They were going to the pumpkin patch, which if you live in Los Angeles, there's like a pumpkin patch every 3 blocks. There's a pumpkin patch. But we were going to miss it because she didn't know this, but we had a surprise for her. And my brother's in-laws, who are very, very generous, for her birthday, bought us 4 Disney World tickets. All expenses paid, minus the plane tickets. They were going to just gift it to us. And so she was so sad about this pumpkin patch, this dusty, old, dirty pumpkin patch that we really could go at any point in our lives. But we had this entire vacation that my husband and I could never afford, paid for us. And she was like unwilling. She was so sad. But then when we got there, of course, it was a million times better than she had ever expected or anticipated. And this is how I liken it to like God's journey. Like we are so sometimes attached to this pumpkin patch, aka the comforts of the world, our own empire that we're building up. When God has like this all expense, once in a lifetime, literally once in a lifetime adventure, just awaiting for us. This Father's heart of wanting to lavish upon us, and we're like, no, I want this pumpkin patch. And I love just even witnessing how the Lord has been taking you on this beautiful, wonderful adventure. And I am so excited to hear and walk with you guys now as you go on your next adventure. And I don't know, I'm just so gifted that you are here and the ways that you have been serving fully at Tapestry these past 2 years.
We love this community
Thank
because
you
I
so
feel
much.
like we're walking not just because we have something to offer, but I feel like this community is so important to us.
It's so rich for us too.
And somehow just being in this community, we feel this accountability. Like we feel this need to be excellent and to be dedicated to the Lord and to keep saying yes. There's so many young people that are looking up to us, and we felt that sense of responsibility. So in a way, this is the best place we can be right now. We've always been committed to local community. I'm a big believer of local church, and we want to be sent by a local church. We always want to be part of it because there's so many people God wants to mobilize. And where else is he going to yield the hearts other than the local church?
Yeah.
So we're committed to this community as well, and we want to just really pray for our young people to all catch this glorious vision of God who's so good, who only wants the best, the all-expense-paid Disney vacation for all of us.
Yeah. I actually wrote an article a while back for our book that we published on rest because of our burnout experience. It's called An Unequal Exchange. And it basically most religions in the world is a transaction. You offer this orange as an offering to some idol, and then they give you back what you want in exchange. For example, a good marriage or whatever it is. It's a transaction. The only difference is Christianity. God asks you for everything. He asks for your whole life. And that answers your question, Nolan. What does yes mean? It doesn't mean yes to all these little things, but it means, yes, God, I give you everything. And that means I will need to say no to a lot of things I want, that I think I want. And we actually cover that in Happily Ever After, in the unit on idols and addictions. Yeah. And oftentimes, God knows just the right time to come in and ask us to give up everything. At the height of my quote-unquote ministry in South Asia, I thought God was taking away my very fruitful ministry, making disciple of this nation, to go away. But in fact, it was because God wanted to give me himself. And saying yes to God means that I will constantly be vigilant to eliminate all other competing idols in my life. And my heart is extremely deceitful. I can't see what I'm addicted to or what I might be worshiping in replacement of him. And this is why I need a community around me to point that out to me.
Yeah.
If I can just say one last thing to encourage our Tapestry members, and we just love you guys, and this church has so much life, so many talented people, and work hard at your job. Your job matters to God. God really cares about your work life, and not just what you do on Sundays or when you come to Tapestry, a cell group, but your 9 to 5, your daytime job is something is really close to God's heart. And I believe work is worship. Work can change the world. So become really good at what you do, because God then can send you to anywhere in the world where you can have truly a venture of trusting God and seeing God move and work, using you as well as using your profession and your skill to impact the world. So I really wanted to see hundreds of us, from Tapestry to go out into the ends of the earth and just use our work experiences to bless the nations.
Amen. And with that, plug in for STM
Yes.
this summer.
Yes.
Let's go.
Come sign up.